Welcome to Side of Science
with Stacey and Clinton, because there's a human side to science.
On today's episode, we've got a special guest with us, and we're taking a deep dive into Huntington's disease.
So Stacey, you've lined us up with a special guest, and we're taking a slightly different approach to this episode.
Right. In these special human Side of Science episodes, we're going to explore the link between people and science, from scientists who live and breathe science to those that science has invariably become part of their life.
So if this is your first time listening, be sure to explore our other episodes too, from chocolate and colour to Mars and biomimicry, and be sure to follow Side of Science.
Ali, thanks for being here and joining us on the podcast today. I've invited you to talk about Huntington's disease, which is obviously very close to you. But if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about yourself first, that would be great.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show, Stacey. We obviously met the other night through our acquaintance Neil, and I was absolutely delighted to be asked to come over and talk about such a sensitive subject. It's a subject that obviously brings home to me very close. I grew up in a Huntington's family, and I had the inside of growing up in a family that normalised it for me from a very young age. So for me, talking about it, even though it does feel quite tense, it's quite a normal thing. For a lot of people, they probably won't have any idea what Huntington's is. It's a disease that affects roughly about 20,000 people worldwide, and I just happen to be one of the people that has that.
Yeah, so when you say Huntington's was normalised, you knew from a very young age?
Yeah. Well, my mother came from a family that had it, and she was one of four sisters. So growing up, they were always they were just normalised to it again from a very young age, and I was really lucky to be brought up in that kind of relationship or environment whereby they can normalise it for us. So I have a load of cousins, and every Sunday we would go down to the house, and they had a massive a meal or a kind of feast, if you will, every Sunday, and it was really just a kind of close gathering for the family, you know. Some of my very close relatives, my auntie Lorna, for example, she was one that hosted this. She would always be talking about it quite openly, and she would give us an insight into the pros and cons of what was happening in the kind of medical advancements, and she would just let us feel comfortable with it.
So this was one of your mum's sisters?
Yeah, my auntie Lorna, yeah.
Did she have Huntington's?
Coincidentally, she didn't have it in the end.
But she didn't know that? She
didn't know that. But the thing is, when you're someone that's in the Huntington situation that I was when I grew up, you have a 50-50 chance. You can either get the gene or you cannot get the gene. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the gene, then you can't pass it on. But unfortunately, if you do have the gene, then your siblings will have the same 50-50 situation that you were grown up with. So from them normalising it for us, we kind of just got used to it, and it made it a lot easier to talk about it with our family.
So can I ask then, so your mum has four sisters. Who in your mum's family, mum or dad, had the gene?
So the gene comes from my mum's side of the family. My mum came from a very remote fishing village in the north of Scotland, just about 15-20 miles north of Inverness. And that was a little place called Och. And unfortunately, Och is a hotspot for this disease. So.
And that must be because families with Huntington's didn't necessarily move on?
To be honest with you, historically, I don't actually know that, but it seems to be that is a similarity throughout these small villages, yeah.
And so was it your mum's mum or dad who had Huntington's?
It was my mum's mum
that
had Huntington's, yeah.
And when did your mum find out that she had it?
So my mum passed away reasonably young. I think she was about 47 when she finally passed. And when you do find out that you've got it, when you become symptomatic, you have generally between a grace period of about 15 to 20 years. So I think roughly my mum would have been about late 20s, maybe 30. I'm kind of doing the maths because I remember when they told me that my mum had it. I was actually at my Auntie Lorna's, coincidentally. And they took me outside and said, some of the movements your mum's been making are potentially exactly what you think it could be. So we went to Aberdeen at the weekend and we had the test, and it looks like your mother actually has it. So, I mean, I was, 11 or 12 at that point. So I was only in first year, I remember.
First year's year 7 for those.
Is that right?
Yeah. Just,
For an Aussie comparison.
Yeah. So your mum had children. You're one of two?
Yeah, so I'm one of two. I have a younger brother, Callum, who's 4 years younger than me. So finding out that information from our mother, that automatically means that we definitely have a 50% chance each of having it or not. So that was quite difficult to get your head around, actually, because you're so innocent and young at the age of 11 or 12, you know. Do
you think you fully comprehended what that meant or what it would mean?
I think actually I probably had a pretty good idea, because we had a strong family base whereby they talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you knew what was coming?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of knew what was coming, but at the same time, it's not until you grow and you go through all these experiences that you actually get a realization for what the side effects are and stuff like that, you know.
So when you say there's sort of a 15-year grace period from diagnosis, there must have been maybe some symptoms or something that were happening around that time that your mum was diagnosed?
Yeah, so for my mother, she was experiencing some... So I don't know if you know this, but the word Huntington's is actually Huntington's chorea, and the chorea section of it is with reference to movements, like jerky movements that you can't control. So as you become more symptomatic, as your disease progresses, this will get worse. It'll worsen through time, you know. So in my mother's case, she had some mild jerky movements, and she had a little bit, mentally she was struggling a little bit. And all of these are... They can and they cannot be symptoms. I mean, people have jerky movements. It might not necessarily mean that.
Yeah, sure.
But in this case, she had to go to Aberdeen to get the test, and then concluded that she definitely had it, you know.
And was there treatment or anything, medications that she went on, or is this kind of progressive and...
No, nothing like that at the time. So the medications at the time were really just to kind of make her comfortable, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think they were kind of dosing her out a little bit just to assist with the stress of what was happening, really. There was no solid medicine or whatever. The medical advancements nowadays are much, much better.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, so your mum sort of suffered then for, 15 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all suffering, but obviously it's not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, she would have been taking some basic stuff, you know. I mean, essentially paracetamol or, you know, whatever else.
Over the counter,
Over the counter stuff, yeah. To be honest, I think she did get prescribed stuff, and I can't remember for the life of me what exactly it was, but I know there wasn't any medication for treating it. And to be honest, it's quite similar now. There's been a lot of medical advancements, but there's nothing solid, nothing solid at all.
So Huntington's disease, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially a gene that codes for a protein, and this protein has repeats of a certain sequence, CAG, say, and it will make a protein and in everybody. But in people with Huntington's disease, if they have more copies of that repeat, then they produce a lot more of the protein, and over time, this will start to damage neurons.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So obviously I just have my own research, and so I think it's a GAC repeat, and essentially what happens is, exactly what you said. So the Huntington gene becomes a mutant gene, and it repeats, and with the excess gene, that's what becomes a mutant gene, and that's what attacks the neurons,
And so the more repeats you have, essentially, the more aggressive, I guess?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. So, for instance, when I went for my tests, I was given my results, and it was like early 40s. So, in comparison, the only reference that I would have for that is my mother's test, and she was like mid 40s.
Right.
Okay, so you find out you've got a GAC repeat of 40x, or whatever it could be. It could be 30s, or it could be later. But the higher the number, then what they say is it'll probably be more aggressive.
So your mum had how many repeats?
She was mid 40s from memory.
And yours is low 40s?
Low 40s, yeah. Which probably just means that I'll become symptomatic at a slightly later age than her.
That's an incredible amount of knowledge to have about yourself and your future. Can you talk us through, I guess, your reason for getting tested, how you got tested, and that kind of background?
Yeah, so being from Inverness, Aberdeen was like the kind of oil and gas hub of I think it was oil and gas capital of Europe at one point. So that seemed like a kind of natural progression to go and try and find work. So I moved to Aberdeen, which is about 100 miles away from Inverness. And through one of the guys that I played ice hockey with, I used to play ice hockey.
Yeah.
So one of the guys that I used to play ice hockey with, he gave me a start in his company, and I worked there for about 7 years. Anyway, I digress, but I was living in Aberdeen at the time. I had a partner at the time, and she and I were looking to have a kid. So obviously I had developed my Huntington's potential situation and been for the test at that point. And she and I were talking about having children, and obviously the Huntington's conversation took place. And then we both decided that I would go for the test before we tried to have children. So obviously I went for the test, and unfortunately it was positive, which didn't end well for our relationship and or for me really. So I've just been kind of managing how I want to play out the rest of my story, you know.
Yeah, that's massive. Okay, so if you've had the genetic screening and your relationship's broken down, were there options, I guess, that were presented to you in terms of how you could have healthy children, or what were you told?
Yeah, so if you find out that you have the gene nowadays, you have an option to have or you can have, if you and your partner so wish, to have a healthy child now. So you can have the Huntington's gene, and then you can go to the doctor and they will give you the option of going through a genetic screening process whereby you can still conceive, but you can conceive with a healthy baby. So what that would mean, or how that would happen, is you would have to give a sample, and that sample would obviously test the sperm, and if that sperm had it or not. So this is one of the other things, actually, because somebody with Huntington's can go to their genetics doctor and have this done, but they don't need to find out if they've got it or not, actually.
All right.
So sorry, I kind of contradicted myself there. But essentially, they can go there with that because they can have a parent that has it. So they can go and they can ask the question, or they can say that they're looking to start a family with a partner and they don't want to get tested. So they have then got the option to do that, and they could potentially have a healthy child.
So they guarantee themselves a healthy child without having to know about their own outcomes. Yeah. That's really interesting. So did that ever cross your mind, not wanting to know?
Yeah, it did. And I'll be honest with you, it came up in conversation a lot because obviously I was at the point in my life, early 30s at this point.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd have a child anyway, personally, it's just my personal choice. And it was getting to the point whereby I felt like I wanted to raise a family. And I know the potential, if I do have it, then it's kind of like a ticking time bomb, is it? So you have to go and potentially get the test, or otherwise you just go naturally. But if you go naturally, then you give the option of giving your offspring a 50-50 chance. So for me personally, I wanted to go through the screening process, but then obviously it wasn't as simple as that, because you're talking about raising a family with another human being and they have wishes and wants, and you're trying to appease that, and that was essentially why I decided to get tested. So and that's how it ended up being positive for me, So
you go through with the test, you find out that you do have Huntington's, and then you've got all this information and you can therefore decide. That's quite different, I guess, to what your mum must have gone through.
Oh, completely. Absolutely. It's quite interesting to see in such a short period of time how far medical advancements have come. Because my mum, obviously growing up with her sisters and her mum having it, she would have seen firsthand what it would do to a family, but she still decided to go ahead and have 2 kids. Just like her mother would have seen it from her mother, and she decided to have 4, with every... Well, it's different, is it? Because birth control probably wasn't the same back then.
Yeah.
But the options for it, are absolutely second to none. There's no comparison. When my mum found out that she had it, there was no medicine, there was no options really, but just to make her comfortable. And then by the time my time comes around to talking about procreating, then I have these options if I want to have essentially designer babies. Kind of.
And when did the test to sort of test for Huntington's come out? Do you know?
I think it came out around about the 1990-ish.
Right,
circa,
so it's actually not that long ago to be able to test for this.
No, so my mum would have had her second child, and then she would have become symptomatic a couple of years later, or a good few years later, and then that would have been an option for her. but it wouldn't have been an option before she had me.
Did she ever talk to you about that, her decisions, or?
Yes and no, but it was a different type of conversation because the options were so limited.
Yeah.
You know, so for her, I think it was just she felt like it was the right thing to do.
For sure. Yeah.
So, you know, it's different for everybody, I suppose.
So your relationship is broken down at this point because you don't want to, I guess, chance having a child naturally that may have Huntington's. Is that right? Yeah. And so talk us through what happens next for you. You now know what's...
Yeah, so from the time that I actually found out that I had the gene, that was my early 30s. And it was a few more years until I found out that I was symptomatic, or at the very beginning of this journey. Yeah, it's probably the best word. So it was a lot longer past when I had found out that. So it was like maybe 7 or 8 years later. And it was the start of the, not the downturn, but it was the start of COVID. So I ended up going back to Inverness roughly about the end of COVID, the middle of COVID. And I was staying over at my auntie and uncle's, I remember. And I was looking for a job, and one just happened to pop up in Inverness. And I put myself forward for it. At this point, I was not looking forward to going, or I kind of accepted that I wasn't going to be going back to Aberdeen for a bit anyway. Yeah. And I was looking for, and it just so happened that I ended up getting a job in my hometown of Inverness. So,
what was the job?
It was a project engineer job.
So quite high flying.
Yeah, it was quite a stressful position. If you will.
Yeah. And so you're now started working in this, and did you say you were then sort of diagnosed with being symptomatic?
Yeah, so I mean, by the time that I had come back to Inverness, I had met a new partner at that time as well, so it was the start of a new relationship, and I had taken on a new job at the same time. Yeah, I kind of felt like I was high flying, you know, I was doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. And then 3 months into it, I went for standard kind of annual screening tests, and unfortunately the kind of genetics doctor told me that I may have what looks like some kind of preliminary signs.
So that means that Huntington's starting to take hold? Is that what that means?
Well, potentially. Right. Because I have found in the past when I've been really nervous that I might get a little bit jerky or stuff sometimes. And I don't know if that's the beginning of it starting to come out, or if it's just stress. If it's just stress playing in your mind. Because another thing that I never mentioned was, because you know what the potential symptoms are, you know, you can be lying in bed at night and you can go through months of thinking that you're moving. And I've done that so many times for months upon months.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to the doctor talking about how stressful it is, you know.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's not really much that they can do for that. It's just assisting you and getting your head around and kind of accepting that it is or it isn't. And then you get back to bed and you're like, was I ever moving? You know.
When you say moving, is it like leg jerks or kind of?
Yeah. Well, I've never really been somebody that goes to sleep easily.
Right.
So I'd be lying in bed, you know, and I'm somebody that gets quite a racy mind as I'm trying to get to sleep. And it's always quite preventative of actually getting to sleep. So it's been quite difficult for me in the past, especially in stages. So it's just another thing that has been quite difficult in the past.
And so starting a new job, a new relationship, high stress, that could definitely have contributed to what they're seeing, these preliminary kind of symptoms. And it might not be...
Possibly.
Right.
Possibly.
Okay.
Because, you know, you go ahead to one of these annual things and they do these very, very simple tests. And I thought I passed all the tests with flying colours, actually. And it wasn't until then she says, listen, I think I've seen a bit of a jerky movement there, so you're going to have to prepare yourself and get ready for what may or may not be coming. But you don't know until you're 100% diagnosed, which I wasn't at that point. But
hearing that must have been, a kick in the guts in terms of you feel like, you've just got everything together, new relationship, new job, and then to hear that, what happens then?
Well, exactly. It's crippling, really.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting in work and you're trying to concentrate on stuff, and you've obviously got deadlines, you've got stuff coming out your ears, and you're trying to get it done, but the reality is your head and your heart's just not in it,
Do you have to tell your work?
It's interesting you say that, because I actually assumed that you would have to, but I was advised from the doctors that I did not have to. There was no legal obligation to say that I was becoming symptomatic,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was when I found out, unfortunately.
And how long into this job before you decided that it just wasn't worth the stress?
Well, I kind of came to it kind of came to a head's end, maybe almost 2 years in actually. So I was there for quite a while afterwards. I'd only been there for maybe 2 or 3 months at that point. As soon as I went back to Inverness, the job almost became available straight away. And I kind of met that person, my ex-partner, almost at the same time, you know. So it kind of felt like it was meant to be, you know. We kind of fell into an easy situation whereby, you know, it was this new relationship, a new job, and it was all quite exciting and stuff. But obviously when I found out that news, I mean, it could have been 3 or 4 months in at that point. I was still kind of getting my feet on the ground. But then as soon as I found that out, concentration was just absolutely impossible, you know. So I was kind of progressing with that. And I thought, you know, I was just going to have to get around the next corner, and it would start to get a little bit easier for me.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you know, it never really happened. So I think just the stress of finding out that I had this, it really made it impossible to really fully commit to work, you know.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the actual test and what they're looking for?
Yeah. So in order to get the test, you need to contact well, it's not exactly the Huntington's Association. It's more like the lead genetics doctor. So in my case, it was a doctor called Dr. Zosha, who was excellent with me. You need to phone up and arrange an appointment for advising that you want to get the test done. So they take you in and they talk about essentially all the kind of all the facts and flows about it, and then they give you the option of getting counselling before that you have the test, because obviously if you need to be well versed in the reality if it doesn't go your way.
Yeah.
Okay. So but it was quite good, really. I mean, when I went for the test, I had an ex-partner that was there, and it was an awakening, because it kind of changed my life forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah.
And these annual tests that you get done to see if you've got symptoms, what's that like? What are they testing for there?
So there's not really too much heavy testing going on there. I mean, it's pretty simple, it's pretty basic. So you can go in and essentially the doctor will ask you to do these kind of repetitive movements. Maybe it's moving on a leg, or maybe it's moving like a finger in front of your eyes, or whatever it could be. But if she sees any, what she would refer to as Huntington's movements, then obviously she'll note it down, and that could potentially be the start of your Huntington's, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so you potentially had symptoms 3 months into a new job, and then you carried on for a couple of years after that.
Yeah.
What was this because of another test, or sort of what happened?
Well, I went back the following year and concluded what she thought it was. So I mean, we kind of knew that. I mean, she was pretty forthcoming with it, but the reality was that I did have to go back the following year, and I think not the issue, but it just made it a lot more difficult, because I found out that I did have it. And it was one thing thinking that you might have it, to then finding out that you definitely do have it. And it changes your perspective on everything.
Yeah.
Because obviously you're sitting there and work, and it was difficult anyway. And for me in that potential situation, it just made it a lot more difficult. And to be honest, I was drowning a bit. So,
and it kind of seems, I guess, if you know your future, sitting in an office becomes not important at all.
It makes it impossible. And you don't want to be there either.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
Well, I was kind of lucky, actually, because I did have a kind of relatable manager, and I did have a conversation with him. I had a couple of weeks off, and then we had a discussion about parting ways from work. So at the time, I decided to go down the occupational health route, and essentially what that meant was the doctor from the occupational health kind of signed me off indefinitely, which was kind of what I was expecting. So it was just exactly as I had planned it, you know.
And how long ago is this?
Oh, gee whiz. So I'm 39 now. I'll be 40 later this year, and I think I concluded my work there about 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years. So
2 years you've known, you haven't been working. How do you kind of, I guess that's done a lot for stress management in itself.
Yeah, well, it definitely has.
Yeah. And then can you tell us about like medications and that sort of stuff, and how you look after yourself?
So at the time when I was working, I just found it extremely stressful, and I had a lot going on at home at the time as well. So I ended up going on anti-anxiety medication, which was quite difficult at first because it takes a while to get your head round. You feel really cloudy for the first couple of days, and then it does get better after time, but it just takes time.
Yeah.
I was still working at this point as well, And I just made it really, well, to be honest with you, I made it impossible. So it was just a long time of trying to get to grips with what was happening and getting used to the medication. And yeah, it's just a lot. Yeah.
Is there anything they can do in terms of Huntington's medication, or is it more around mental support and sort of...
To be honest with you, it's definitely more around mental support.
Yeah.
I was always quite an anxious person anyway, and then when I found out all the kind of bad medical news, my anxiety was absolutely just tenfold when I was in work, you know. So it just made it a lot more difficult to communicate effectively, and yeah, it just came to an end. But to be honest, now that I have done that and I've kind of flourished a bit in the sense that I'm starting to get a lot more comfortable with myself and just a little bit more accepting of the situation and trying to keep the stress down. Yeah.
Medically, do they offer support and your support network in terms of friends and family? What's been available to you?
Yeah, I think realistically I've been quite fortunate because I've had a very strong support network through friends and family as well, obviously. But I think the biggest thing for me has really been stopping working, actually. Yeah.
In what way?
Well, it's just less stressful.
Yeah.
Because I was, at the time, doing a job that was probably just a little bit out with my means, and it was a lot to take on for anybody, let alone somebody going through this, you know.
Yeah.
And just having the ability to be able to go over and travel and stuff. Obviously, I've got friends here in Australia. That's what I'm doing here just now. I'm just here for a few weeks. And I was saying to you guys earlier that my dad's remarried now, and he lives in Austria. So generally, I go out there for a few months each year.
Lovely. So you get to travel around a bit and enjoy life as much as you can while you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so with terms of friends and everything, is there anything you'd want people to know? Do you find that people maybe don't speak about it or don't talk to you about it? How does that kind of work? Is it the elephant in the room, or are you quite open about it and want to tell people?
Well, to be honest, in the past, I've not been very open about it.
Yeah.
So I think from my own perspective that people should be open about it. And I do think that they'll find that they'll get a lot of comfort in talking about it and making it feel a lot easier for them. Because not speaking about it is, from my perspective, probably the worst thing that you can do, because you're just going to suffer in silence. You need to be open and vocal about it. And, a problem shared is a problem halved, is it? Yeah,
that's great advice. So now, knowing what you know, if you could have a conversation with yourself before you were diagnosed, what would you say?
I'd probably advise myself to be a little bit more selfish, in the sense that, at the time when I got tested, it wasn't 100% for me, and that kind of alters what my future options were. So had I been a little bit more selfish and just says, right, this is not working for me, this really shiver, whatever, then the reality is I could have not got tested and not found out that I had it, and it would have allowed me to potentially meet somebody else, and I could have raised a family via the genetics unit, so that if I had any words for myself to give to me or anyone else that's listening, then I would say that you really need to think about this option, because it can really be a big changer. Game changer for you.
So you wouldn't want to know?
Potentially. Yeah, I don't think I would have if I have the... but it's like such a difficult question, because you grow up with that possibility, and you always want to know it. You always want to know it. So it's like when the option did come, I did want to find out. I knew it was an option, but in hindsight, was it the best option for me at the time? Probably not.
Is it true that you have to wait to be 18 before you can go and get tested?
I mean, I was a lot older than that anyway, but I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
I would need to double check.
Yeah, so would I, but I imagine that's something is in place for that, because it is essentially, looking into a crystal ball, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would just like to say that part of the reason that I decided to do this was for my niece and nephew. I'm very close with them, and obviously they're going to have to embark on this journey. I just wanted them to hear my side of my story, and that it's okay. It's okay to want help, and it's okay to speak about it,
Yeah, that's amazing. What a great thing. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on here, for sharing such a personal story, and for your honesty. It's huge. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for listening to me.